Sur les sujets qui nous intéressent et sous l'angle maritime, je vous propose sans plus attendre d'accueillir l'amiral Nicolas Vaujour, chef d'état-major de la marine nationale française, et le contre-amiral Johan Norlén, chef de la marine royale suédoise. La scène est à vous.
Eh bien, bonjour à tout le monde. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais remercier les organisateurs de cette conférence et l'état-major de la marine pour l'invitation, car l'école militaire, c'est un lieu très important dans ma formation professionnelle et personnelle. Quand j'étais jeune étudiant à l'EHESS, ici à Paris, il y a 20 ans, la bibliothèque de l'école militaire, c'était un point de référence dans la formation de mes études. Et surtout, aujourd'hui, la marine française et le centre de recherche de la marine française, ici à l'école militaire, reste un point de référence dans le débat international pour le développement de tout ce qui est la pensée maritime stratégique. Et en fait, parmi les publications qui nous permettent, en fait, au niveau international de continuer à garder ce type de conversation, je tiens à vous montrer le travail de mon collègue Nicolas Mazzucchi, La confrontation en mer, l'avenir de la stratégie navale, un livre qui vient de sortir il y a quelques mois et qui clairement se porte à lier le discours international géopolitique avec tout ce qui est l'importance des marines aujourd'hui. Et donc, merci beaucoup pour cette invitation. I will now switch in English just to prove the point that maritime strategists can be multi-domain and multilingual and keep things easy and open. But insofar as the questions are concerned, please do feel free to ask your question, French, English, or any other language. I'm sure we'll sort it out. Swedish, particularly Swedish, go for it. But today I'm particularly delighted because the theme of our panel discussion this morning, European partnerships in the age of major power competition, is the sort of theme that you want people with gravitas and authority to talk about. And I'm just as lucky to have that sitting just next to me. I'm sure you are aware of the Chief of the French Navy's background, Amiral Vaujour, and Johan Norlén's, Amiral Johan Norlén's background. A couple of things that I wanted to point out, which I think are very important for our conversation today. They bring two very different perspectives that are absolutely central to the conversation and the topic that we're talking about. I'm always I like the little trivia, and I like to remind the audience whenever there's a Swedish admiral in the room that Sweden has this incredible task of having a coastline with 267,000 islands. That's the largest number of islands of any country in the world. So if you think about the Baltic and the challenges that we have today, well, a Swedish admiral is your man to talk about that. But Amiral Vaujour, on the other hand, brings us another important question that we're going to be talking about today. The question of the here and now, as opposed to the tomorrow. Navies are technology-intensive organizations, and in the contested international geopolitical landscape of today, they are called upon a really difficult task. To get a navy ready and the fleet ready, as Fleet Commander in the UK always says, to fight tonight if needed, but at the same time, they have to think about the fleet of tomorrow. What are we looking at 10 years down the road? And there is a natural tension. Amiral Vaujour, with his background, having commanded anti-air defense frigates, having been exposed to the demands of the here and now, commanded the Opération Sagittaire for the evacuation of French nationals from Sudan a couple of years ago, is only too aware of that kind of challenge. So the rules of the game, what we try to do, we have a hard stop at 9:40. So we've got about 37 minutes, as it were. What I'll try to do, I'll try to open up the debate cover three main areas: the readiness versus investment challenge, the national versus multinational commitments, and then try to set sort of the stage for a broader conversation, because at the end of the day, this format is about having an opportunity for you all to engage with our speakers. So we'll try to leave about 5 minutes in the end, 8 minutes in the end for a few questions. I want to start with Amiral Vaujour, and let's talk about the strategic context. What do you think? And, you know, I've checked the news this morning. Things haven't changed since last night. So we can, you know, our baseline is yesterday's fine for the next 10 minutes. What are the key issues in the strategic space that you think we should be thinking about?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I am very pleased to be here. Of course, it is the École Militaire is for all of us a place where we can debate, we can think about, and it's always a great pleasure to exchange ideas here. And I am also very pleased to welcome here Admiral Johan Norlén. He spent some time here also in the École Militaire in Paris, and so he is a French speaker, but he challenged me and he asked me to speak in English, so we will speak in English. I will try to do my best. But okay, for your first question, I think we Europeans, we are at a turning point right now about defense and security. We used to develop a lot of operation in common, so we are able to work together. We have done Atalanta mission, we have done Aspides mission, we have done a lot of mission like this, but it was more or less low-end mission. And so the question we have to face is, are we ready to high-end missions all together? I mean, we used to work together, so that's not a big issue for us, but that's the question we have to answer today. Are we ready to go in another world, I mean, in another high-end mission capabilities? But we are ready already to work together. The second thing is we have at the strategic level a kind of recalibration of the international relationship. And so the weakening of the international rule-based order, of course, is a big challenge for everybody, because the foundation of our way of doing is the international rule-based order. So without this kind of reference, it is something which is quite tricky for us, and we have to refund the way we are working and the reference we are working. And of course, what is doing also at the same time is a question about the robustness of our alliance. Are we sure that we all agree on every simple basis of our alliance? And this is a real strategic issue we have to answer together. One of my strategic also looking today is that the world is closing on itself. I mean, when we are under stress, when we are challenged in our defense and security issues, more or less every time you are looking at yourself and not looking to the other guys and not looking to what can we do with other guys. And I think the biggest answer we have to provide is that we cannot do everything alone. And so the answer is always partnership. And the challenges are so high that we need to respond together. And even if we are looking more or less to our national commitment and national issues, we have to open our mind to find the option together. And so that's the big issue we have all today. I ask more questions than giving solutions, but I would like probably to give you back the floor.
We'll ask Amiral Norlén. I'm sure he has the answer to this question. But there's three things that the Amiral already put out there, which I think are very important to think about. This question of the canvas of missions is going back to be much wider than before. Yep. And it goes from HADR to counter-piracy and sort of management of governance at sea. But the kinetic element, the risk of the kinetic element is back fully. So that's one. The second, the fragmentation of the international order and its implications for alliances and partnerships. And at the same time, the third element, the risk of becoming inward-looking and missing the point that these are very complex questions that require partnership as an answer. Would you agree? Would you add others? Or would you give us the answers? No pressure.
No pressure at all. Thank you very much, Admiral, and distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen for the opportunity to be here today. I think you said it in the start here. Really, you put it nicely. We come from totally different backgrounds. So I'm head of a navy that actually has been developed during a non-alignment periods. That means that for you, I can say that over the centuries, decades at least, we have been creating a navy to respond to the threat of invasion in Sweden. And that is our heritage. We live with that. We have that today. We are going for some extra in the future, but we must understand that that is what we come from. And if you talk about during that time, we have produced, we have created, we have built up our capabilities in a close cooperation between us and also the defense industry, so that our equipment are basically created to perfectly function in that type of area, in type of crisis. And 100% come from also, and that is also important because you mentioned here, Admiral, high-end warfighting. Everything, the raison d'etre for the Swedish Navy has always been high-end warfighting. And what we see now today is actually that today we see high-end warfighting still is a big issue. It's coming strongly together, thank you. But also the low-intensity things that in hybrid warfare that turn up the heat and really mixes the floor here a little bit. So now I stop there, but saying I think that if you look at the complex environment, where the complex environment is always the sea is always a complex environment. But I can just talk from my backyard actually, and the Baltics with its immense. It's a confined area with a lot of traffic. Let's say it's about 4,500 vessels every minute, 24/7. And if you compare that traffic intensity with, for instance, Singapore Strait, 1,000, the Channel, 1,300, 1,500. So this is a really small confined area, and underneath and on the surface bed here and the seabed, there you have also the linkage with cables and all the other things that come into play when you talk about critical underwater infrastructure. So you need to control that area. You need to have a remote maritime picture that really are a remote maritime picture. And you will, as the Admiral here mentioned before, we used to do this by ourselves, but nowadays that doesn't work anymore. We need to work much closer to our partners, allies, and as you were beginning to say, I think that it's fair to say that when we stepped into the alliance 1 year ago, I'm glad to say, we thought maybe a little bit naive that, okay, nowadays bilateral and multilateral things are not so important anymore. I'm so wrong on that point. I'm quite sure that it's even more important today than it used to be.
I don't know, but you see, you had the answers. But I want to stay with you for another minute or so, because you touched upon this question of the sub-threshold space. Because obviously for Sweden, this question of the threat of invasion always plays that kinetic element at the forefront. But today, part of the challenge is that the invasion may or may not come, but what is happening every day is that sort of intense and consistent level of coercion happening in that sub-threshold. What do you think are the implications for navies? And you mentioned in that context the question of the multi-layered nature that goes from seabed to air and space. 1 and 2, even Sweden cannot do it on its own terms in its work with others, but presumably, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, from a naval perspective, that is also part of the challenge, because the infrastructure on the seabed, it's not owned by the military, most of the time it's private, so how, from a naval perspective, what are the implications of the picture that you just gave us?
Well, to just give a quick start here, they might spoil the occasion here, but it's not, from my point of view, it's not a naval task.
Brilliant.
But having said that, well, this is Sweden. A lot of authorities, and so what happens when we have a fair amount of poor seamanship in the Baltics recently, as you all know, I'm quite sure of it. So a lot of dragging anchors and a lot of cut cables. And basically, what happens? You touched upon something that is very important. If you look at the countries around, once again, take the Baltics. You have 8 countries there, 9, but I think that we can left out one of them and stick to the 8 ones that are following the rules. Basically, there are now 8 countries with totally different systems. And in Sweden, for my example, there I said that this is not a naval task. Well, it does. It of course it is, because we are the guys with the capability to do something about it. So actually, it ends up with the private company owning the cable. You have that one authority, the police, starting to do the investigation. Goes over to the Coast Guard because they are out at sea doing the police matters, but they can't do it, so they call Chief of the Navy. Hey, can you help me to do the investigation? And so there it is. So, for instance, the same goes with Finland. I got a phone call quite early on the 30th of December saying that we have a problem here. We have an anchor on the bottom, and I think you might be the solution to that problem. And then it started. So it goes from the ministry level to the ministry in Sweden, and then ends up with the Navy doing some task. But it's not my main task. And the important thing is that you need to pay attention and a little bit of caution, actually, so that we don't end up doing a lot of these things like we react on everything that it goes on, because then we reach our culmination point quite soon in that area. So that's another point of view on the same matter.
I think there's 3 things you say there that are really important. One, I think you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily a naval task, but the naval dimension. The Navy is part of an ecosystem of resilience and defence. The second point he made there is about that tension that exists today. At the national level, it's a vertical level of coordination, different bodies within the same state, but also horizontal, because most of the time, your competitors will try to strike in places that will create tension or challenges among different actors. And of course, undersea infrastructure is very much at the heart of that. So that understanding how to operate vertically within the country and horizontally across partners is the second point that you touched upon, very important. And then the third thing that is nested in something very profound that you say, not to react to everything, because that's impossible, right? Particularly with critical undersea infrastructure is just not possible. And if you stretch it to maritime critical infrastructure, which includes also offshore wind farms and so on and so forth, I think the question is perhaps to think in terms of resilience, making our systems more resilient, and then the places where you need a defence kind of approach to run it. I mean, from your perspective, and this is perhaps a little bit more detailed than we thought at the beginning, but what is your... I know that the French Navy has been working on seabed warfare. You're very much at the forefront of that debate. From your perspective, would you agree with the Amiral? What other thoughts you want to share with us?
Yeah, the first thing is that the French Navy is definitely sometimes different because we have at the same time the high-end Navy warfare capabilities, but at the same time we have the Coast Guard duties. And so I am both the Chief of the Coast Guard and the Chief of the French Navy. And we call that in France the action of the state at sea. And it means that we are very linked. We have a very strong ties with private companies, other administration working at sea, ability to fight in the lawfare, ability to do something everywhere more or less. Because our chief of the North Sea, our chief of the Atlantic, our chief of the Med Sea is at the same time the prefect, the maritime prefect. So he is able to act in the name of the state to make something like a policeman, I mean. And so we have a kind of continuity from lawfare to administration action, and so on. So it's very powerful. And we see every day that it is much more powerful when we are speaking about hybrid warfare. And I really appreciate the discussion yesterday morning with the Dutch MOD when he said that when you are thinking about hybrid warfare, it's like when we are thinking about hybrid cars. Hybrid cars are cars. Hybrid warfare is war, more or less. And so you have to do something. And so, of course, I do not have all the capabilities to fight on the seabed at the moment. But we are developing the seabed capabilities, but also we are reinforcing the way we are working with private companies. And so to establish the undersea maritime awareness picture, we are not alone. We are working with private companies. They are saying us, okay, we have a problem there, as you are doing. And after that, when we have to act, when we have to protect, when we have to investigate, when we have to repair, the question is to say, who is the best place now? And so the question is not to do everything. The question is to build an ecosystem able to answer the question. And so under the hat of the action of the state at sea, we are more powerful to respond and to be able to act very, very rapidly. And of course, it needs that we have to build trust with private companies. I'm very happy to have Naval Group here. I think it is a trusting company. We have very strong links with, of course, Naval Group, but with Orange Marine, which is a big company of cables on the seabed. And so we have very strong ties with private companies in order to reinforce the resilience of the way we are acting at sea.
There's something that is emerging, you both mentioned too, and this question, it doesn't matter how at the national level what your arrangement is, but the key thing is to have a seamlessness in terms of how public, private, and different institutions work together, because at the end of the day, and you mentioned something really important with the lawfare dimension, first and foremost, in the sub-threshold, what we're looking at is attribution. Is bringing light on something that by design is meant to be opaque, because opaque leads to the inability to respond. Eliminate that and you're taking the weapon away, if you want, from those. So thank you for this. It's very important. But, sorry, Amiral, please.
No, you're right. We call that the legal finish, I mean. And so it means that of course, we can use Navy capabilities to intercept traffickants, to intercept bad guys in hybrid warfare. But the final question is, do we have a legal finish in order to conclude the action? And that's really important. That's key. That's key in immigration. That's key in drug trafficking. That's key in hybrid warfare, of course.
Beautiful. I never thought I would say this, but now that we've dealt with the easy bit, let's talk what used to be easy and now it is not anymore. Which is partnerships. And I want to start with an easy question, right? What does NATO mean to you? This week, not 3 weeks ago. But I think you both mentioned this already, the question of partnerships and the question of a multilateral approach, for lack of a better word, right? Last few days, we've heard talk about coalition of the willing when it came to Ukraine. Of course, NATO remains the bedrock for Europe, but wanted to touch upon this tension between national commitments and multilateral commitments. We cannot find all the answers by ourselves. We need to work with others. Partnerships is the answer. How do we go about it? Amiral, can I come to you first, and then I'll come back to Amiral Vaujour. Well, you time to reflect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Well, and then now you turn the question to one who has been a member for almost 1 year.
Exactly. So
okay.
you're fresh at this,
and,
right?
And then we have 200 years of non-alignment in our history and in our in our genes, I would say. So I would just point out the fact that the Swedish Armed Forces has been part of the, well, not the alliance, but a partner to the alliance since '94, when we stepped into the partnership peace. And since then, especially the Navy, I would say, of the services, has constantly increased the readiness together with its partners until the day of 7th of March 2024, when we went from partners to allied, and it feels really good, I must say, even though we are experience some disturbance in that sense as well. But I would say that working together, because we see that we are stretched in so many things all together. By and large, our partners and allies have the same struggle, because we have lived under a peace dividend for so long and underfinanced our forces in such a way. So right now we are much more better equipped in terms of financial means, but now we lack the time. And what we need to is, together with the military industry and the whole society, actually, to work around all the obstacles we have created during the time of peace dividend, so that we can actually get some new capabilities on the table right fast and here and now, but at the same time keep two thoughts in the head. So we need to plan for the future as well. If you look at Sweden as an allied, I would say that the Swedish Armed Forces were not fully, but we were quite interoperable before we came in as an allied. What we're lacking right now is the connectivity. We have still a struggle with connectivity. That means that we don't have the right crypto, the right things to really work so close that we would like to work. And that goes also for the thing I said about the RMP. We would like to share our picture with the whole region, with the whole identity of Allied, because when we do that, we can see a pattern, and we can see also much easier together when something in that pattern makes a detour or something like that, and react upon that much quicker than we can today. So connectivity is one of the major issues, and I would say that Sweden and Finland and the French Navy actually has worked really close to do that in one way in the Link 22 area actually. So I'm quite happy to say that. I would just finish off to say that this was the point of view from the Swedish Armed Forces. If you talk about NATO and the Swedish population, I think we have a slightly longer journey to do that, because you must bear in mind that 200 years of non-alignment and neutrality, well, that then tends to harden that question a little bit. But I think from if you take a poll in Sweden right now, 60, 70, I don't know, but they are still very, very favorable for the NATO issue, because there wasn't any other solution on the table. So I think that's you should always bear that in mind, that it takes some time. We are the youngest partner, youngest allied. 1 year, you have 75 plus. So that means respect. That means when we need to benchmark with our older allies to really understand what does NATO integration really means. And we are getting there, step by step.
Amiral, thank you so much for the positive element. NATO and the alliance as an opportunity, as a place of growth, as a place to rebalance part of the equation, but also raising the question of command and control, particularly as the environment becomes more hostile. One has to be able to share information in real time, and that's a step up from interoperability, particularly in slightly more sort of adversarial context. So thank you for raising this, please.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned before, Amiral Vaujour, you said something along that we need to step up to be more warfighting. Well, that's for sure. That's that's on the table. It should have been long ago, but right now we are experiencing that time pressure even there as well.
Yeah. Amiral, if I could be a bit cheeky, France is a global. I'm not allowed, but I'll take the. I'm chair. I'm abusing my powers. The French Navy is a global navy. The Strike Group is coming back from an Indo-Pacific deployment, balancing the task between NATO commitments and multilateralism in Europe, as opposed to the national sort of tasking, which obviously sees the French Navy at the forefront of it. From your perspective, what does that entail?
I just would like to add something before.
Oh, yes, please, by all means, yes.
About NATO, sometimes some nations say that France is always 1 foot outside, 1 foot inside. Definitely we have the 2 feet inside. And the question for us, for NATO is really important because if we want to reach the level of plug-and-fight, plug-and-fight means that day one you are able to connect, you are able to fight together against an enemy. You need procedures, you need connectivities, you need plans, you need trainings. NATO is providing standards, procedures, trainings, plan, C2 structures, and so on. And so for us, for all the navies, for all the armies, air force, and so on, the question is interoperability. And interoperability for me is, of course, as you said, Johan, connectivity, which is always challenging because technology is going so fast that we need to be always at a good level. Procedures, it means training and real training, I mean, not a very basic one, high-end trainings. But the third one, which is the much more important about interoperability, it is trust. Trust between partners. Because you are going to open the pipe of the connectivity because you trust your partners. And even if you are in a big alliance like NATO, you need to have trust with your partners in order to be stronger together, which is the motto of NATO. And so that's really key, trusting your partner. And trusting a partner is, the first step is in a pub with a beer and to meet personally. I mean, it's really important. I think that this kind of event is really important to build the trust between partners. So coming back to your question about how we manage to have the balance between the national commitments, international one, NATO one, and so on. Of course, I think all the nations have a national commitment because the first mission of a navy is to protect your national interest, of course, around your homeland, your overseas territories, everywhere in the world. So if you have a French citizen asking for help in Haiti, of course, we are going to divert a ship to help him or to help them there. The question is, of course, the French Navy is global. We are sailing on all the ocean in the world every day, and we have interest everywhere in the world. So it means that we must be present, and we must also develop partnership, not only in the Euro-Atlantic area, but everywhere in the world. And for me, partnership means, of course, like I said, personal relationship, but also access. When you are in a world where everybody is closing on itself, it means that sometimes you need to have place to replenish, to recover your ammunition, to do some repair on something. So you need to build partnership everywhere in the world in order to have an access in the world, in order to be able to stay long time in the world. And when you speak about the Carrier Strike Group deployment, she's coming back from Singapore at the time, and they are going to work with India. That's two big players in the game in the Indo-Pacific right now. So this is two big partners for us, Singapore, India. Working with them without any NATO procedure, which is not that easy, is something which is key for us. Because if something is going wrong there, we are building the trust between our two navies in order to work like this. 12 nations participate to the deployment of the Carrier Strike Group. 12 nations were able to help in the escort of the Charles de Gaulle. And it's, for me, a very good symbol of what we are able to do with a big assets like the Carrier Strike Group, is to welcome all the nations able and willing to participate in that kind of deployment. And so it's really important to have that mindset of partnering. I mean, You use the deployment to increase, to improve, to reinforce your partnership with every nation. And it's a win-win deployment. It's not only to have a new nation around the porte-avions, it's to help the Navy. To increase the level, because when you are around a carrier strike group, it's definitely not the same to sail alone with your frigate. So that's so we are balancing always between national commitment and international one. And the last one, which is really national, it's deterrence, of course, where we develop a very huge capability about, of course, for the Navy, we have, as you know, the submarine deterrence, and we have also the ability to have the air deterrence on board Charles de Gaulle. And so, of course, it's a national commitment, but as you know, the President is opening the reflection with our partners.
On this last point, I think I like very much what you're suggesting, trust both as a precondition and an enabler. It does both, it cuts both ways. A precondition in order to think about doing things, but also an enabler, because if you've got trust, you can push things further down the road. Now,